Hannah, welcome to B2B Content Strategies podcast. It's great to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited about our conversation today.
Me too. It's going to be fantastic, I'm sure. So to kick the conversation off, Hannah, just to ask you if you could tell me a little bit more about your role. It's a fairly new in role, so like a little bit about your role at the moment, but also what BambooHR does as well for anyone who isn't familiar with BambooHR.
So yeah, I can start with that. BambooHR is an HR software for small and medium-sized businesses. I think what drew me to Bamboo the most was how easy the interface is of the actual software. It's basically like having an HR assistant in the cloud. And it makes managing employee data and hiring, performance reviews, all of that really easy. While also being super affordable, especially for small and medium-sized businesses in comparison with more enterprise-sized softwares. So my role currently at BambooHR is I lead our programs team. And basically what that is a team that is dedicated to more mid to bottom of funnel demand generation efforts. So we're really driving a lot of leads and pipeline to our sales team. And BambooHR is really unique in the sense that all of our sales motion currently is an inbound motion. So our sales team relies really heavily on marketing. So it's very exciting and also very high pressure in the sense that we want to make sure that we are delivering the best possible leads that we can, people who are actually ready to purchase, rather than just sending every and any lead over to our sales team. So I have the opportunity to be able to lead out a team of marketers that does that.
That's awesome. And in terms of what that team looks like, so what kind of like roles, how have you divided the team up and what does that look like?
So I have 2 team members who focus primarily on our internal go-to-market strategy, really working with like our internal paid social, paid search, and SDR teams to make sure that everything that we're producing from the BambooHR channels, it's being received really well and it's converting well. And then I have one person on my team who is in charge of our external go-to-market strategy. So really working closely with third-party vendors, associations, partnerships, as well as our internal events team to do any sort of like external sponsorships. So that's kind of how we have things split currently.
Great. So in terms of in your current role, but also looking through your career as well, what kind of roles or I suppose more skill sets do you prefer to always keep in-house? And then what skill sets do you often tend to look more to outsource to freelancers or agencies, but tend to bring those skill sets in on a more kind of flexible basis as and when you need them?
I feel like it has varied throughout my career, and just depending on what stage the segment that I'm working on is. But typically what I like to do is based on the team's strengths, just really allow the teams to play to their strengths and keep those strengths internal. I feel like you always find these pockets of talent within your marketers as you really dig in and try and understand, like, what do they like to do? What is their history? How do they get into marketing? What do they have exposure to? And figuring out, like, what of those skill sets can we be using internally? And does that align with how they want to grow their careers? And then basically all of the other stuff that we don't necessarily have internally and people don't want to develop into, that's what I like to do externally. So I can give a quick example. A couple roles ago was working at Pluralsight, which is another software company local here to Utah. And we were building a brand new public sector team. We had public sector event support, but we had never really built content for public sector. And we had just a super tiny team of like 3 of us. And we didn't have anyone on the team who had like a super strong background in content marketing. So what we actually ended up doing was my boss at the time had been in the industry for 20 or more years. And she had said, hey, I know that there are these handful of vendors. They have different public sector specialties and audiences. So what we did was we kind of selected 3 or 4 of the ones that were the best fit for us and had them develop a lot of our content. And a lot of it was like pay to play. So we would say, hey, we want to do a research report that's targeting technology teams in government. So let's come up with a research report, and then really led with the direction and the vision that we wanted to go, but then leveraged all of their resources for people who are really good at content to basically get our portfolio going. And then once we kind of had that under us, we were able to work closely with our internal content team to say, okay, this is what we've built with third-party vendors. Here's what's performed well. Here's what's resonating with the audience. And then they were able to kind of go and make it sustainable so that we weren't always constantly having to like pay from our demand generation budget to get content made.
I really love that example. It's funny. I was just reflecting on asking that question with previous guests and how they talked about almost the opposite in terms of them doing everything first to get everything set up and learn it and everything, and learn the ways and what they wanted and find the perfect methods and things like that. And then they outsourced because they said we wanted to do it first and then get somebody else to kind of take it from there. And I like what you said, which is kind of work with the clearly deep industry specialism as well to take things so far. And then you guys take things further and then work with them in the capacity that you need to. So I really like that example.
I think it builds like genuine partnerships too with the third party vendors, because I think in a lot of cases, marketers will kind of go with this laundry list of like, here's everything that I need you to do. Here's how many leads I need you to deliver to me, rather than thinking of, okay, what's the unique audience that they have access to that I don't currently have? They know their audience the best. They know what resonates with their audience the best. And so if you can lean into that expertise, you have so much more opportunity to capture an audience that you wouldn't typically be able to. And with that first go around, another lesson that I really learned with outsourcing was give them direction on here's what we're trying to accomplish. For example, we want to get this audience in particular that we don't have access to really engaged and lean on our brand as a thought leader in the space. So here are kind of like the different things that we're looking for, but we can be flexible. Here's the budget that I'm wanting to put behind all of this. Come up with a plan for me on how to accomplish that in the way that is going to, one, resonate with your audience the best, but two, be most organic to what your existing content calendar looks like. And I feel like we got so much bang for our buck because it was like they were really invested because they were like, holy smokes, this company has a huge investment with us. We want to make sure to keep the contract as long as we can. And then for us, we were getting really high quality content that we were then able to share with our internal teams, but we were still like on an ongoing basis, still using that vendor because again, they still had the audience that we were trying to capture. And so we were able to pump content that was then being made internally into these external vendors. And it was just like this beautiful relationship where we kind of depended on each other for a lot of things, but we became so close and it became so much less of a transaction and more of an actual partnership.
Which is absolutely perfect, isn't it? And I love how you said that it all started with really defining the ultimate goal and what you were actually trying to achieve, because it's a shame sometimes when you hear about the opposite situation where let's say the agency or the outsource provider is just one piece of the puzzle, but they don't actually know what the puzzle is like. And so, and they're just kind of doing what they're good at and doing it to the best of their ability, but there isn't the North Star. And so it's only good to a certain extent because what is actually being achieved at the end of this. So I really love that example. And a question that I absolutely love asking on the show is, what is your most memorable B2B marketing campaign? And so, across your whole career, most memorable, not necessarily most successful or anything like that, but it really sticks in your mind. And why was it memorable and what were the success factors of that campaign?
Yeah. I'll actually go back to my experience at Pluralsight. Like I had mentioned, it was a brand new team. We had never really charted public sector waters before. And so we kind of started with the end in mind. Again, just started with, okay, what do we want to accomplish? That we had been given some pretty lofty goals, from the outset. And just like the first couple quarters in, we were like really missing our goals. And it was like pretty deflating. Okay, this has worked before. Why isn't it working now? And thankfully, the boss that I had at the time was like, public sector just takes a long time. Like, we need to trust in the process. And she gave me a lot of confidence in being able to continue moving forward with a plan. But it was really just like a foundational marketing campaign, like establishing ourselves as thought leaders in the industry. And so we really led with the same type of messaging all year long. We weren't switching from like, oh, our product offers this and it offers this and it offers this. It was more focused on how can Pluralsight at the time help solve some of your larger public sector issues that you're dealing with your tech teams. And we kind of just anchored on that. And like I mentioned, we had used some third-party vendors to really help us build that storyline. So fast forward to 5 quarters in, we had missed our goals 5 quarters in a row. But then when we were looking back at how things have grown year over year, we realized by the end of that 5 quarters, oh my gosh, we have grown 200% in this time period. And it was like, yeah, maybe we're missing our goals, but there is meaningful growth happening here. And then following that 5 quarters, they just started hitting number after number after number. And it was like that rolling, like, oh my gosh, we've built so much to get to this point. And there's been a lot of negotiation that we've had to do with our executive team to help them understand, like, yes, we do still need to invest in this area. It's going to take longer than the other segments that we have targeted before. And I think just having the confidence of my leader gave me a lot of confidence to then speak with the executive team and say, hey, like, don't sweat. Like, this is everything that we're doing. We're going to nail it with this audience. We just need to give it time. And here are all of the contracts that we have at play right now, but it's just going to take some time for them to go through the red tape and get these contracts approved. So that for me was the most memorable, because it was a very helpful lesson for me as a marketer that good things do take time. And you can't just snap your fingers and overnight have a ton of opportunities rolling in. And I think that campaign in particular has served me very well throughout my career to have more of an end in mind type of mindset.
Do you think that, you were saying that you were given masses of confidence from the leader who you were working with because they talked about the patients and gave you that reassurance? Do you think that they were not quite aligned with those goals that were set in the first place? Did they challenge the initial goals to begin with?
Yeah. Well, and I think like a lot of marketers, there are typically other business functions that are coming up with the goals. And like, we can inform the goals to an extent, but that marketing team at the time, our goals were being given to us by either finance or operations. And even though we had said, hey, we don't think we're going to hit that because, like, let's look at this historical data, plus what we know about the industry, that's going to be pretty unattainable. But I think the company in general had placed pretty big bets on, hey, we're going to see this much revenue come. So then following the next year, they were able to like really lean into, okay, we know that we need to readjust these goals to make them more realistic. And then at that point, we were like blowing them out of the water because we were shooting for the stars at that point. But yeah, I think despite us giving that feedback of, we don't think we're going to be able to reach the goals, at the end of the day, it was still a brand new segment. So like, we could somewhat predict like, hey, we know that these sales cycles are probably going to be closer to like 12 to 18 months, even up to 24 months for some of the larger federal contracts. But we went forward with like a hypothesis, hey, we think this is going to take longer. At the end of the day, the business said, well, we really want to see more out of it. And then the following years was when they were like, okay, yeah, we really want to make sure that we're consulting with this marketing team to understand what deals we already have in play, what accounts we're targeting from like account-based marketing standpoint, and what is going to be a more predictable business goal.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. So interesting. It wouldn't be a podcast of mine if I didn't talk a little bit about content repurposing. So I actually have an entire other show that is about repurposing content, but I have to dig into it a little bit here. So across all the different types of content, videos, webinars, reports, white papers, blog posts, all the different spectrum of content that we create in the world of B2B. Do you have a favorite type when it comes to creating content that you want to get more mileage from, that you want to kind of get as much from it and repurpose it? Is there a favorite repurposable type of content that you have?
Webinars. And I know that a lot of people have big feelings about webinars, but I think from a marketing standpoint, they are so content rich and so easy to break into smaller pieces. My favorite thing of all time with webinars is being able to come up with a really meaty webinar that you can then take sound bites from and promote via like video content on LinkedIn or Meta, and be able to make blog posts from one topic that maybe we didn't get to go as deep into, but all kind of like spider webbing back into one core asset. That's like my favorite thing to do with content. One, because usually resources are slim and you want to be able to get the most amount of legs out of any piece of content that you can. And I think webinars are just so easy to get a whole host of different content types out of, because once you kind of have that core talk track, it's really easy to pull out blogs, case studies, sound bites, videos, whatever it may be from that one resource.
Yeah, and you guys at BambooHR are excellent at doing that. And, we've had the pleasure of working with you on HR Unplugged. And I think actually when we first started working on maximizing webinars, most webinars we worked on initially were BambooHR's webinars, supporting you guys. You're really, really good at that and do such an excellent job. This season has been the season of that the answer to that question being webinars. It feels like even across slightly different industries, that there really is a love for them as what they are and them as what they can become as well. So do you feel that within the team, do you feel that there is that repurposing mindset and that people are always looking at what they create and what it can become? Because I find it's very much a mindset just as much as a set of systems and tools and processes, because if the mindset isn't there from the beginning, it can always be a bit challenging to get that as a thing that you do within the team.
Yeah, I think that's actually something that we're trying to solve right now at BambooHR. We have an incredible content team. It's like they can come up with content out of thin air, and it's really high quality. And I think as a result of the success, there has been this overall culture of, well, then let's make more of it. Like, this content is so good, let's just make more of it. And we're in the process right now of getting back to the basics of, let's pick one theme and one topic and figure out, how do we create these core assets that we can then piece out so that our content team isn't having to recreate a wheel, in a sense, by being asked to do 6 different content pieces that are pretty much telling the same story. So we're in this interesting shift right now where we're trying to get back to the basics of, rather than thinking of something as a piece that we're going to run for a month, let's think how we can make it evergreen, rather than focusing on just like, hey, this audience, we're going to start with this piece of content, promote it for a month or two, and then go to another piece of content that is completely unrelated. We're trying to do more of that storytelling and connecting the dots so that our content team isn't getting burned out, and so that they can really lean into the creativity of what's the journey that this potential customer would be going on with our content. Is it cohesive? Does it make sense? Instead of focusing so much on volume.
Absolutely. Music to my ears. I completely agree with you on that.
And it's not perfect. We haven't figured it out 100% yet. I think there's still we're still kind of working through that push-pull of oh, okay, we've always kind of gone on a month-to-month basis. That is one unique thing about BambooHR, is that we're a month-to-month business for our customers. And so I think that's just kind of ingrained in the company mindset of what can we do month over month to show impact? But from the demand generation side, we have to be really careful with that mindset, because we're not giving our content enough time to make an impact with the audience we're trying to reach. So that's something that we're actively coaching to, working towards, is figuring out what are those industries or pain points that we really want to anchor to, and help storytell a little bit better than saying like, we need a piece about onboarding, we need a piece about hiring. Really figuring out what's the all-in storyline that we're trying to walk people down, and what's the content that we need that we can have on an ongoing basis and target better in general. Like, how are we capturing the audience when they're in the awareness stage? How are we getting a hold of the audience when they're more in like a decision or purchase phase? What are we saying differently to them that's pulling on that same thread, but a little bit more in depth based on where they're at in their buying journey?
Yeah, it's so important to do that analysis as well, and making sure that you're not going too heavy in only one quadrant as well, isn't it? And that you do actually look at what you're creating and what you've got. In terms of content and talking about it not so much being that volume play. So something that's very good at volume of content is AI, but not necessarily always the highest quality volume of content. So I'd love to ask you about that in terms of how are you leveraging AI in your content creation, content marketing efforts?
Yeah, I think from the demand generation standpoint, what we're trying to do is have all of our content plans be research based. So what we'll do is work with our product marketing team, and they'll kind of run research on either like a hot topic or a specific industry, and try and understand who the audience is. And then from there, we'll start working with our creative and content team to start understanding what's the story that we should be telling. So I feel like AI has been most helpful in just getting that first draft started and helping to start formulating a storyline, being able to input, okay, we're dealing with X, Y, and Z pain points with this specific audience, and these are the different types of titles or roles that we're targeting. So how do we create a cohesive storyline? So it kind of starts pulling all of those little like data points together, and then we can kind of use it to say like, okay, yeah, actually the way that it's spelling out the storyline, this doesn't make a ton of sense. Or like, yes, that's exactly what we're talking about. Now let's look at our content library or the creative assets that we have already to understand what content types would resonate really well with this audience, or like, how do we need to tweak the storyline to make it more impactful for who we're trying to reach? So I kind of see it more as the refining process of being able to take multiple data points, bring them all together, and find the commonalities for how we want to start storytelling to this audience.
Absolutely. And do you have any preferred favorite tools that you like to use?
So we actually have an internal AI sandbox that has been really helpful. I feel like you always get a little bit nervous about internal tools and like whether or not they're going to be buggy. But I think our engineering team has just done a really good job. And so we've been able to use an internal tool to help us and also kind of incubate a little bit more and not worry about any like data of ours getting out that we don't want out, or any specific ideas getting out there that we want to kind of keep a little bit more internal.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's fantastic, isn't it? Because if you are using something proprietary internal, at least, like, for example, you and the marketing team, you know that what you're experimenting with and putting in there, you're not having the fear of whether you're providing any information to something like ChatGPT or Perplexity or Claude, because that is, you know, very much going into the public domain, isn't it? So it's awesome that you've got the skill set and the capability within the company to create something. Do you have anything in particular that is an absolute no-no for using AI for? So like any like funny tales or cautionary examples of where it's like you do not use AI for that in particular?
For me personally, I feel like I have tried so hard to like, I don't know, I've tried using the AI function in Canva, and every single time the images come out so weird, or like the way that things are formatted are just weird for me. And I don't have the skill set to be able to like use the really intense like AI photography or videography type of stuff. And so that for me is like, I'm just going to steer clear because I don't know enough about like video or imagery standards that I want to steer clear. I don't need any person in my ads looking like they only have 3 fingers.
Yeah, which sadly is something that we see quite often, isn't it? So,
oh, 100%. And you can spot it so fast too, which is funny. The intent with AI is to make people's jobs easier, but I think sometimes people anticipate that AI should be doing their job, and that's just not the case. I think it's more just supposed to be some guidance rather than the finished product. And I think too many people, too many marketers in particular, will use AI as the finished product. And it's just easy to spot out. It's not genuine.
No, I feel like there's too many marketers that abandon all the quality standards that they probably adhered to for their entire career. And they're just like, I mean, I get it in terms of, yeah, but that's because I would have spent 10 hours on it and that just did it in a minute and it's all right. And it's like, but you wouldn't say it's all right in the old world. If you own stuff, you'd have worked at it till it was great. I don't know, like, I feel like there's a lot of throwing out a lot of standards that you previously had and just being like, yeah, but it's just easy and quick. So I know what you mean on that. Well, looking into your crystal ball, so to speak, what do you think about the future of B2B marketing? So let's say, you know, in the kind of next 5 to 10 years, is there a particular major change or particular innovation or anything that you think is going to be on the horizon?
I feel like this has been something that's been top of mind for a lot of marketers in recent years, but I just see it becoming more important in the future, is just humanizing your brand. I think a lot of B2B marketers have gotten really, they lost the fun of marketing. It's just become very corporate, very stale, and too focused on data points and trying to convince people with data, hey, you should use our product. I genuinely think that B2B marketing is going to become more like B2C marketing. And we're going to have to get a lot more creative and personalized with how we're reaching our audience. And personalized in the sense that, like, we're not just saying, hey, BambooHR, come look at our software, and using that type of personalization, but really understanding the audience and understanding what is important to them, because that's how they're sold in the B2C world. Like B2C, I feel like I've never been in B2C. So for me, I'm always in awe with how well people are able to target their consumers with like moment in time messaging with the exact product that they could possibly want, and that they're persistent. They're not worried about, I don't know, shaking up their message every month or two. They're able to just keep sending the same type of content or advertisements to people until they purchase. I think I saw a stat somewhere that was like, I think it used to be like 7 interactions before people would start considering your brand. And now it's more like 15 to 20. So it's only getting more and more. You're only needing more and more exposure. And so I really think that the future is going to be a lot more heavily focused on how do we adopt B2C type marketing strategies into our existing B2B strategies.
I absolutely love that. That was such a great answer. And I completely agree with you. It's funny because I'd really hold BambooHR up there really high as already being very good at the humanizing of the brand and everything too, you know, with the content. I think you guys do an awesome job with that as well. So this part of the show is where the guest from the last episode is asking you a question. So the question comes to you from Matt Clooney, who is the CMO at NewRes. And the question that he asks is,
I'd love to know a bit about the last rockstar marketer that you hired. What made that person so special?
Yeah, I had the privilege of hiring somebody a couple companies ago who didn't necessarily have the background that we were looking for, but on paper, he just had so many of the experiences that we were looking to incorporate with building up a new segment. I think his history was he had worked as a one-man team in the marketing department at Tribal Casino. And so it was very, very much a different audience that he was reaching, but so much of what he was doing was done independently. And I knew that I needed somebody who could build alongside me and who would be a go-getter, who was going to be willing to take risks, not require too much direction. And he ended up being one of the biggest bets. He's still at that company, absolutely crushing it. And somebody that I still have maintained really close contact with just because I admire him so much as a marketer. He just came in and immediately was like, where can I pick up a shovel and start helping build this thing? And there was nothing more gratifying than having somebody on the team who was willing to do the work, figure out the hard things, and be willing to fail, because it was a lot of testing. So it was awesome to have somebody like that on the team.
It's willing to fail is just so important, because we learn through our failure, isn't it? And some people are so crippled with the fear of making mistakes that they, it stifles creativity and problem solving and everything. Sounds like you hired for all the right reasons and the excellent attitude, and everyone wants to have someone like that in the team, don't they? So what a great example. So the next guest, it's going to be a fellow leader in the B2B marketing world. What would you ask them?
My question is, do you think scalability is going to be as important in the next 10 years as it has been in the past?
Fantastic. I love it. Yeah, thank you. Awesome question. And I love, like I said, I loved your answer to Matt's as well. That was fantastic. Well, Hannah, thank you so much for coming on to B2B Content Strategist. I could ask you loads more questions, but we're out of time, aren't we? So thank you for coming on. Is there any next step that you would like the listeners to take? Should they connect with you on LinkedIn?
Yeah, I would welcome people connecting with me on LinkedIn. I'm always looking to get new ideas from smart marketers, because I know that I don't have all the answers, and I love connecting with other professionals who have done things differently than I have.
Yeah, well, something I'm really proud of with this show is that everyone listening in is a super smart marketer. And so it'd be great to connect with you. And like we said, we stick together and we learn from each other, don't we? So thank you, Hannah. Absolutely fantastic. Thanks so much for your time and for sharing so much value and being so willing to just share your experiences. I'm sure everyone listening has got a lot from it. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Amy. I appreciate it.